Hey there, NPCs. Welcome to Rules of Cool, where we interview very special guests, creators, gamers, designers, and world builders. I'm your host, Ava, and today we're going to be speaking with returning guest OC Opti Presley about his brand new cyberpunk-fantasy ttrpg, Subversion, now on Kickstarter.
Yay!
Stay tuned. In other Rim Alternatives news, Subversion, the new cyberpunk-fantasy TTRPG by Fragging Unicorns Games is now live. You can build your community and subvert authority at every turn in this gritty Neo-Babylon setting. You can follow the project now, and if you back now, you'll get a free map poster with your hardcover copy. Exit Vector is an aerial combat minis game coming to Kickstarter March 28th, where you can give your pilots some much-deserved attention as you use the rules light system on its own or as part of your cyberpunk role-playing game. Get your rigor on with Exit Vector, and follow the link in chat to check out the project. Don't forget to enter your email so you get all notifications. Well of the Worlds is also coming to Kickstarter on April 4th from Mobius Worlds Publishing. Using the Prowlers and Paragons Ultimate Edition, this TTRPG setting transports characters into a new fantasy world, where they discover that they have powers they didn't back in the real world. Inspired by Japanese isekai or Western portal fantasy stories, such as Tales of Narnia, this is a world of adventure for you to explore. You can learn more by visiting that link in chat and following the project. And now we'll get right into our conversation for this week. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back, RemPCs. So, Opti, we've seen you here before.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Now it's about one of your projects again. Let's start at the very beginning, actually. What inspired you to create Fragging Unicorns Games?
So the inspiration for starting the company is that there was, 2019, there was sort of just seemed like every time you heard about a creator, in the online space, like, just Twitter, for example, or Facebook, it's like, oh, hey, there's news about this creator that I like their stuff, or like this creator who's popular in the industry. And it was like, oh, they stole money from their from their freelancers, or oh, they harassed somebody, or oh, they got themselves in trouble with some, inappropriate stuff. And I thought, man, this is just like not fun, right? Like I don't love being in or somebody was harassed online, or somebody's bullied out of space. Like it just felt like the whole industry itself was undergoing a little bit of like heavy time, right? Like things were just like really, really like in this space that's supposed to be welcoming and fun, and like it's all about games and like bringing in the outcasts. It just felt like there was an awful lot of just negative stuff, right? So we thought, what if we put out a different kind of energy into the space? What if we were, instead of making the best games, maybe we won't. Instead of making the most games, we definitely won't. What if we just instead focused on being the absolute coolest people in everything that we did, right? So let's pay our freelancers way more than we need to. Let's pay them on time. Let's pay them half up front. Let's, make sure that when we interact with people, when we write our books, we're taking everybody into consideration. We're just trying to do everything right and not, sort of bring any negative stuff into the space, and try to be a company that did more good than harm in an industry that should be the default, but that clearly was not for whatever reason. So that was the whole inspiration behind starting a company of our own.
So it was like a be the change you want to see in the world type situation?
Yes, absolutely. Right. It became very clear that I couldn't fix everything wrong. So
Right.
We'll just do as good as we can, for ourselves.
All right. And so one of your other projects has been Misspent Youth.
Yeah.
And we had you before on the show to talk about it, and we played it some. So for those of us who in the audience who might not have been there, why don't you tell us about Misspent Youth?
So Misspent Youth is a game that existed before Fragging Unicorns. Robert Bowl was the creator of Misspent Youth and the second book in the line called Sell Out With Me. And that's a game of teenage rebellion in a fragged up future, right? So you're playing punks and rebels, and you're trying to take down the corrupt power structures that the adults have messed up, all the while not selling out your own values and things like that. So it's a narrative RPG, and you only roll two d6, and there's not a lot of number crunching, right? So it's a lot about relationships. It's a lot about sort of over the top toppling of power and stuff like that. It's a super fun game. And then we kickstarted that last year, and we actually just fulfilled at the end of last year. So we did it last year, and we completed it last year and sent it out last year.
I think I've got my copy sitting on my bookshelf back there behind the blur.
Yes, I think I can.
About three of them, actually.
There you go. That's the one that we made. And
there we go.
And Ava, you had a chapter in that book too. I didn't write much. Yeah. I did a lot of the layout for that book, but Clifton Lambert was the one who wrote the main text, and then you and a number of others had a different setting in that book, which ended up everything that I've heard from the backers has been super over the moon about it. So good job.
Thank you. Yeah, it was super fun to work on that.
I submitted it for an NE this year. We'll see what happens.
Ooh. I can't wait to see how that goes.
An NE nominated or an NE winning author. Just wait.
All right. And so tell us about Gangs of the Undercity.
Gangs of the Undercity was our first Kickstarter game. It was a cyberpunk-fantasy miniature skirmish game. So if you like Warhammer, that should appeal to you in some sense, or if you like Shadowrun, then it might appeal to you in some sense. But the whole impetus for that was we love cyberpunk and we love fantasy. We love like Shadowrun, for example, and there weren't as many minis as we wanted to be for the space. So we thought, let's make our own minis game, and learned an absolute lot about the industry and creating games and Kickstarters. That was the sort of first go in any of those spaces. But yeah, it did well. I think over 500% funded on Kickstarter, and we just fulfilled. We fulfilled the main game a while ago, but right now we're waiting on one final miniature for complete fulfillment of that project, and the miniature is a little pet griffin, and it's a mix of a coyote and a crow. It's called a croyote, and that's the one we're waiting on. And that I just got confirmation that the final mini is it's already shipped out to us. I should be getting it tomorrow, and then we'll finally be done with every single bit of fulfillment. The final 12 or 13 people from Gangs of the Undercity will finally get all of their minis, and we're pretty excited about that.
Took them long enough, huh?
Right? Oh my god! You can only blame COVID for so much, but then once it got started,
I mean, it's been 3 years now.
Yeah, right. And then like Royal Mail, like absolutely crapped the bed a couple weeks ago, and they just like stopped tracking everything and just stopped. So that was another big setback. But yeah, we're finally to the point where we're getting all those minis out, and then we'll be able to sell them. Right? We have a bunch of cool minis that we'll be able to put up for sale. And it Gangs of the Undercity as a lead-in. Maybe you intended this.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Gangs of the Undercity is actually set in the same world as our new game, Subversion. So that was a miniature skirmish game, and this next game called Subversion is the role-playing game that's set in that same universe.
So tell us about that universe. Tell us about Neo Babylon.
So Neo Babylon is a setting that's much like Earth. In fact, it's basically Earth in an alternate history. But on our Earth, the Babylonian kingdom rose and fell a couple of times, but then ultimately they sort of extended their reach too far, attacked Egypt, and then eventually that led to their whole empire crumbling. Alexander the Great took over Babylon, and then basically the Babylonian civilization ceased to exist, despite Babylonian culture and mythology having a huge impact on the cultures and the mythologies and religions that came later. But what in our universe, we decided, the idea of magic returning to the world, that's been done a couple of times and probably better than we can do it. So we thought, like, what if we took a fantasy universe or a universe in which magic had always existed, and instead of bringing it back into a cyberpunk future, what if we fast forwarded a magical universe into a cyberpunk future? So that's the sort of story of the world of Neo Babylon, that now in our world it's a cyberpunk future, but it's in a world that has always been infused with magic. And so you have magic itself sort of acting as a stand-in for money and power. So the people who have access to magic and the spells and the knowledge, they keep that very constricted so that not everybody can have it, so that they can keep their place at the top. So the powerful families and the powerful people in Neo Babylon are almost always the people that are from these powerful families and the people that have the magic to control things.
All right, so something I hadn't actually thought about before now, when talking about Subversion. So you talk about the fantasy setting and propelling it forward. Was there any thought of, I mean, that's basically subverting the norm for the fantasy genre, because you have a lot of fantasy worlds. They just kind of tend to be their medieval Europe-based, and it seems like there was history before, but nothing moves forward beyond the current.
Right. Yeah, so we did try to, intentionally subverting some of the tropes along the way. It was absolutely intentional. But then also, most fantasy takes place in like medieval settings, right? Or the weapons and the technology is medieval. We decided to go pre-medieval, right? So ours starts off in the Iron Age, and it's not medieval at all. Like, it's Babylonian themed, and it sort of takes Babylonian loanwords and Babylonian ideas and pushes them forward to the point where it's almost sort of subverting a cyberpunk trope as well, where in cyberpunk worlds, people with the technology or the money are usually the ones who are at the top, and then you have sort of like mystical people or magical people who are on the bottom, and it's sort of leveling everything out. In Subversion, the magical haves, right, and the magical have-nots that playing field is being leveled by the influence of technology, right? So new technology is now sort of being the subversive element that is allowing people to connect with one another over long distances, allowing people to build things and to have power that they weren't able to have before, or that only the magical people were able to have before. So it's subverting the trope not only of the medieval fantasy world, but also the trope of technology being the big bad thing. We just thought, like, what if technology wasn't the big bad thing? What if technology was also something that could be helpful? And then also, what if technology is the big bad thing? Once the wrong people get it, or once it's being used for a wrong purpose. So we're sort of playing with all of those tropes along the way.
So it sounds like it's almost a return in the to like the old science fiction genre, where they looked to the future and technology as, wondrous machines were going to do the work so that we could do the art, instead of the reality that has become recent.
Well, it's certainly the case that cyberpunk does ask those questions, right? Like the questions of, is all technology just sort of good? Well, cyberpunk would answer no, right? Is all technology sort of neutral? Cyberpunk also would answer no. What do you get when you allow technology to run wild without thinking of the unintended consequences, right? And we didn't want to lose any of that. Sometimes, though, when you apply cyberpunk to a role-playing game, the role-playing sort of tropes that we've all carried on from early D&D, right, where the sort of cycle of play is go kill things, get more stuff, right, and level up so that you can go get become stronger, so you can kill even stronger things, right? That's fun. I love that. But when you apply that to a genre that is meant to critique power and meant to critique technology. And then you've got like basically the cycle of play being go out there and use technology to become more powerful so you can get more technology. And it sort of doesn't quite do what the genre was meant
Right.
to do, right? It,
Hmm.
it sort of acts against itself. And so that's one of the things where we definitely wanted to set it in a cyberpunk genre, because those are the questions that we also want to ask. We just want to sort of come at it from, maybe instead of, this would be helpful, maybe focusing on the punk a little bit more than the cyber, right? So like, what are we doing with the magic? What are we doing with the technology? If we're not making things equal, if we're not helping our communities, then this is probably not a good thing to be doing. Yeah.
Right. And speaking of communities, that's right into my next question, actually. So the system that you've designed is designed to build up community within the dystopia rather than tearing down the big megacorps with their boot on the little guy's neck.
Yeah, I would say, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I would say, I mean, tearing down the megacorps certainly something that we like doing. So it's not like you can't do that. But we also realize that in a cyberpunk world, if you dangle out the idea of fighting the corpse, but you instead end up working for them, or instead getting beat down by them, and ultimately they never change, right? It's you that changes, and sometimes not for the good. Like that's ultimately not a story that we're interested in telling, right? Just simply like dangling out the idea of change without actually ever having anything change. So
Right.
we started asking ourselves, like, what feels good? Like, what level of change feels good? Like, when you get done with a campaign and you look back, right? Did you really change the world? And we felt like the lower down we got, the more to the community level, right? The more neighborhood level, the more sort of grabbable we could make it. If we make the end goal to build up the community, then that actually feels a lot better, right? If you accomplish it, it actually feels a lot better than dangling out a goal of taking down a corporation, but you never reach it, right? Because the corporations are too strong. So you
Right.
might be able to take it down a small corporation, but more importantly than that, or maybe just as important as that, is building up the community that you have, right? It does nobody any good to simply take down one corp to have it be replaced by another, when you could actually just build up the community that you're a part of, right? Build a school, build a library, make sure the kids have food. That is so much more fulfilling, and ultimately, matters more to the people that are close to you and your character than it would to just simply, take down one faceless thing to be replaced by another.
All right. So let's get down kind of more into the system itself, less the genre and setting.
Okay.
So tell us about the community building part of Subversion.
Yeah, so like right after your session 0, right? That's the first thing that you would do after you talk about, your expectations and your safety tools and that kind of stuff, is you and the GM and the rest of the players would build the community together. So you would talk about what kind of community you want to build. Are you a bunch of traveling nomads? Are you a neighborhood? Are you a bunch of wage slaves that are trying to push back against your middle manager? Right? You can sort of do anything that you want to, as long as you have a tight knit group of people. One of the things we kept thinking about was like, how do you replicate the crew of Serenity, or so, like, just it doesn't really matter what the community is as long as it is a community. And then once you do that, you start asking yourself what resources the community has, and then you ask yourself, who are the NPCs in this community, and then finally you'll get to the point where you're asking what the community values. Like, what are the 3 or 4 things that this community really does well, or what does it really take pride in, or what does it really have as sort of non-negotiable things that it believes. And then after that's all done, you have your character creation. And as you go through character creation, having that community all in place and having built up that community together, it really feels like your characters know their place, right? And when you're making your character, you're like, oh, I know exactly where this person fits. I know this NPC, like, and you could build your character as part of the fabric of that community. And once you're all done with character creation and community creation, you really feel like you have a living group, right? Like it's not just a bunch of people that meet in a tavern to go do random stuff and then make their own castles or whatever. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. We love that. But also, like, there's another genre of the game, right? That's more about relationships, that's more about community, that's more about hope. And that's the kind of stories that we want to tell. And from everybody that we've talked to, as soon as they get done with the community creation, the character creation, these characters feel real in a sense, right? They feel like they have purpose, they feel like they have direction, they feel like them, and the players can inhabit them quite easily.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. I know, I mean, you were there. We did the day one stream for the Kickstarter. And as soon as we finished creating the community that we did on stream, I knew exactly what the character was that I wanted to play.
Yeah.
But I would have had no idea before that character creation.
Yeah.
And then we wound up not doing a one shot, and I was so sad because that was originally the plan. And I was so excited to play this character. And so I'm hoping we do manage to get it in the works to do another stream later on during the campaign, and where I get to play her.
Yeah, it's sort of a fun game in and of itself, right? Like character creation is almost its own reward, but in Subversion, it actually really it makes a big deal. Not only creating your character, but your community too. Its community is almost like another player character that that the GM sort of moderates, but the players all have a stake in as well.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about character creation. What is that like in Subversion?
It should feel, pretty pretty comfortable, I think, for people who have played traditional role-playing games before. But you have your attributes, you have your skills, so those should all, again, feel fairly comfortable. But then you get into paradigms, which are sort of clusters of related abilities, so that you might have like an artist paradigm that your character might take some skills from, and that will allow your character to sort of become a certain kind of artist. You could take, you could go up the gunslinger paradigm, for example, and if you have 3 characters that are all specializing in ranged combat, and they all take abilities from the gunslinger paradigm, they will all feel different, because one might take, skills that allow them to be a sharpshooter. One might take skills that allow them, or abilities that allow them to be a quick draw artist. One might take, gun fu or whatever, right? And they would all feel different, despite all being ranged combat focused characters. They would all feel very unique, because not any particular character is going to take the same abilities from those paradigms. But further than that, you also have values and impulses. And values are, I suppose they would function a little bit like alignment in D&D, but instead of sort of being a cardinal direction that your character sort of has to stick to, instead you have these values, I will statements. I will always take care of younger people. I will, not put up with anybody who insults me. I will make sure the goblin libraries are stocked with goblin books. I don't know, right? Whatever your character really, really is about, you just make that into an I will statement, and that is the sort of guiding star for your character. And when you, instead of getting experience points for killing things or completing missions, you would instead get your advancement points called fortune for being true to your values at the end of each session. On the other side, you have what are called impulses. And impulses are the things where your character can deal sort of healthy ways with their problems. Like if they get low on health, or if they get low on their sort of mental capacity, they can use healthy ways and take a longer time to rest up and make sure they do it right. Or they can get those things back really quickly using their grit. And grit is sort of like the ability to sort of keep going when everything else falls apart. You use your grit, you get low on grit, and the way you gain grit back is by indulging yourself with your impulses. So your impulses are the things that are like addictions or phobias, or just anything that sort of hinders your character or makes them act in ways that they don't really want to, but they find themselves acting anyway. If they indulge in one of their impulses, like if they say, hey, my character is allergic to cats, or whatever, and they see a cat and they say, hey, I want to take this time and say my character sees this cat and accidentally, breathes in a lot of this cat air, so they're going to be they're going to be hindered during this scene, right? Or my character avoids that cat, right, and runs to the other side of the street and abandons their players, right? Whatever they do to sort of complicate that scene with one of their impulses, they will get 3 grit. And like I said, grit allows you to sort of avoid taking damage. It allows you to do some cool abilities, right? So spend 1 grit and increase damage or whatever. But your grit runs down pretty quickly, and so indulging your impulses is a way to gain grit back. But the GM also has grit, and the GM can spend 3 grit to say, hey, I'm introducing a cat into this scene, and you have to sort of like role play against that if the GM uses grit. So there's sort of push and pull with grit and impulses. But at the end of the day, the impulses and the values of your character sort of make them who they are, even more than whatever cyberware or whatever magic skills you might have, etc.
So you mentioned the push and pull, and I was wondering, was it concern that might introduce or incentivize what is the phrase I'm looking for? I just had it in my head.
Like taking away player agency? Is that what you were maybe thinking about?
Antagonistic GMing styles. More us players versus GM.
Yeah. That was a conversation that we had, but there's a number of different ways that the GM can spend their grit. And ultimately, the players have a role in how the GM gets grit. So if the players do things to override the GM's will, like, so for example, if the GM might, an NPC might hit them, or the character might do something really, really amazing. If they use grit to do that and overwhelm what the GM wanted, then the GM gets grit, right? So the GM will only really have a lot of grit if the players are constantly pushing back against fate, right? Mm-hmm. And so it sort of gives you an idea, like the GM say, like, okay, if they're going to keep using grit to do this, then I really need to push back on them so that sort of fate balances itself and they're just not steamrolling everything they come in contact with. But the GM doesn't just have antagonistic ways to use grit either, right? So they can, give their NPCs rerolls or whatever. It's not necessarily antagonistic. It's trying to use grit in the same way that the PCs might. But also at the end of scenes, the GM can offer PCs to gain grit back. It's a trade. So the GM might give up 3 grit and the PCs might gain it. And the way that they do that is the GM will say, if you take time in character to talk with one of your friends about what just happened in that last scene, then I'll give you 3 grit, right? So it's it feels a little bit silly, right? But what we've baked in is the idea that talking to your friends about your feelings about traumatic things that just happened can actually make you more resilient, right? So we thought like that was a very purposeful decision, that talking to your friends about your feelings about bad things that happen can absolutely make the universe feel less dangerous and can absolutely give you a little bit more of a solid chance to be able to respond better in the future to things. So we built that into the game, and the GM can also sort of help the characters in that way with giving them grit.
I really like that, the thought, and it especially pushes the thought that, like, you're stronger when you have people to rely on,
right?
And you've got people backing you up. And yep. I really like that departure from, Shadowrun is obviously always there that I compare it to, because I've played Shadowrun for years. I really like that.
I made a podcast about it. It's great. Go play Shadowrun.
It is. But I really like that. The community feeling, aside from the everyone's a lone wolf Shadowrunner types.
Yeah, and not just community. Like I said, it's about doing the things that will keep you healthy, right? And having healthy relationships, right? So there's even a part where you can, if you work at it, you can actually get rid of your impulses, right? Like that's one of the options that you can choose if you're just sort of making sure that you're keeping your grit, above a certain level, and you're making sure to use your downtime in certain ways, then if you keep your health above a certain level, you can just say, okay, I've worked on it. I no longer have this impulse. I've sort of done the work and have become a better version of myself. So yeah, it's about healthy stuff. It's about what happens when we experience trauma. And we were trying very hard to say, to make, how I say this, to make mental health important without trivializing mental health into a game mechanic, right? So we're sort of vague in some spots, but also we take seriously the idea that you can't just go out and slaughter a bunch of things and then go to bed at night and be fine, right? We take seriously the idea that there are certain ways, that you can act that are going to enhance your life, and certain ways that are going to sort of push you away from your community. So we want to take all that stuff, especially ideas around moral injury and moral stress and moral trauma. We want to take those things seriously, because if you're an adventurer type in a cyberpunk world, you're just not going to get out of that completely healthy, right? Like that's going to cause some stuff for you, right? It's going to give you some baggage. We want to take that seriously, and also sort of push the idea that if you do want to change the world, then the world's going to want to push back on you, and you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to give up in order to affect the change that you want to see? Are you willing to give up your physical health? Are you willing to give up your emotional or mental health? Are you willing to give up your community? Are you willing to give up your values? And all those things have a cost to them. And instead of just saying there's a cost, we wanted to actually reflect that in the game itself.
All right. And there was one question earlier in the chat that I think, now that we're talking about characters and whatnot, might be a decent time to answer. So Billy Berserker was wondering if PCs can become a part of the upper crust in Neo Babylon, but need to lower themselves to protect their community in the Undercity.
That's a good question. So Subversion doesn't just take place in the Undercity, right? So Subversion takes place in the wider world of Neo Babylon, although you could set it in the Undercity if you want. But yes, you can make a character that is part of the upper crust. You can make an entire community that's sort of part of the upper caste. If your cast of your character is much different from the cast of your community, that is going to cause a little bit of friction, a little bit of conflict. But you absolutely can do that. And the idea of somebody sort of coming down to help a lower caste community would be a pretty cool idea, I think. And you absolutely can do that, yeah. Or alternatively, if you build up your character, that is, if you build up your community with your character, instead of spending fortune on yourself, for example, you can spend fortune directly benefiting your community. If enough of the player characters do that, instead of building up their own skills, they build up the community in some way, then the community can actually increase its caste, which is sort of like a end of campaign goal. But if that's what your characters focus on, then you absolutely can do it. Yeah.
All right. And we've touched on this briefly, but what can you tell us about the actual system and what gameplay looks like?
Okay, so the system, the mechanics of Subversion are basically boiled down to a D6 mechanic, and that should be familiar, but it's actually kind of unique, although somebody told me that maybe 20 or 25 years ago there was another system that had something similar, but we didn't know that. And I don't think it's out in the space much right now. But the mechanic is you roll a number of d6s equal to the skill you have, or the rank you have in a certain skill. So if you have rank 4 in persuasion, then you would be rolling 4d6 in order to make a persuasion check. Once you've made the roll, whether it's rolling 5, 6, 7 dice, whatever, you only keep the highest 3 dice, and then you add those together, and that's your result, which you compare up against a target number, which should feel pretty similar to D&D, but instead of rolling a d20, you're adding up the highest 3 dice of the 3d6 you roll, which gives you a nice from 3 to 18 roll. And that can be modified by your attributes, again, very similar to D&D style. That's the basic, as far as like what you end up doing, which is a little bit different than that.
The floor is yours.
You're instead of like if you're familiar with Shadowrun, right, where you get your jobs from a mysterious Mr. Johnson, or if you are again in a tavern and you're approached by a mysteriously hooded figure, in Subversion, you're most likely going to be doing the things which your community needs, right? So we focus on direct action a lot in that. In Subversion, in the world of Neo-Babylon, the corporations and the government and the lawjacks, that's the sort of corrupt cops in Neo-Babylon, they're not out to help you. They're actively out to better themselves. And so anything that your community needs, anything that's going to better your community, is not going to get done by them. So your community has to take direct action if it wants to help itself. And that's why they have appointed what are called envoys. And your PCs act as envoys. That's a sort of default position that your PCs will be in. And so your community appoints you as an envoy and then says, hey, you're going to basically do all the things that our community needs done, all these sort of random things that we can't trust the corporations or the government to do. And we'll tell you what that is, or you can do it, on your own. If something comes up, say, hey, so-and-so at this restaurant needs tomatoes and the supply chain is down. I need you to go get tomatoes, right? Because they're a big source of, how the community keeps itself fed. Or eggs, right? We need you to either go find some eggs, go steal them or whatever, or we need you to just go find some chickens so that we can take care of it. I don't care. So the envoys, actually, that's a good point. The envoys have a great big latitude as far as what they can do and how they do it, as long as they solve the community's problems. There could be a gang that's sort of hassling people, like deal with the gang. However you want to do it is fine. So those are the kind of things that they will be doing, but basically doing the kind of things that the government or the lawjacks or the corporations or whatever should be doing in a perfect world, but are not. So yeah.
What about on kind of a grander scale? Like you've got, D&D campaigns, maybe you're trying to overthrow you've got a baby EG, typically, big bad evil guy. What do you picture that, being the creator, what do you picture that kind of end goal of a campaign in Subversion being?
So I would say that as far as big bad guys, if a GM wanted to make a big bad guy, they absolutely can. What we're not going to do, probably, is make a big bad guy for you, right? So there's not going to be any, here's the big megacorps that are affecting everything, or here's the wizard in the castle. Like we're just not going to do that, because we want your particular campaign, your particular group, to be compatible with everything that we're going to do in the future, right? So you're not going to have to upset the lore by asking like, oh, can we do this? Or what if we take down this guy? Is that going to affect anything? Or is this corporation, falling? Is that going to affect the lore in the future? We want to make it as easy as possible for your game to fit in with what everybody else is doing. So when you create your community, right? Neo-Babylon is a big place, right? It can fit somewhere. Wherever you put it, that's where it can be. And we can have thousands and thousands of different communities created, and we can just assume that Neo-Babylon is big enough for all the communities. So the big bad guy of your campaign is going to be whoever you want it to be. And you can either befriend them, go to work for them, you can take them down, you can kill them, you can firebomb them, but leave the CEO alive. I don't care what you do, but by the end, right, you can do whatever you want, whatever your players want to do. I think the whole point is, and I don't mean to sort of dodge your question, but the point for us is not to have a big bad guy, or to at least, if there is a big bad guy, make it so particular to your community and your people, right, that it wouldn't make sense to have a big bad guy told, it wouldn't make sense for us to tell you who the big bad guy was, right? It's got to be personal, or it's not going to be important. So probably the big bad guy, right? If I was going to just be cheeky, I'd say the big bad guy is poverty. Like the big bad guy is, not having enough food. The big bad guy is, having a community that's children are uneducated, right? Those are the big bad guys that feel very important and particular to the community, and that you absolutely can do if that's what you choose to do. Or, whatever, fish people from underground, you totally take those guys down too, whatever. There's definitely going to be some of those wacky, like technological threats, and there's going to be some magical threats and fantastical threats too. But at the end of the day, we're trying, let's say this just hit me. We're trying to tell a story about community and relationships that also happens to have cybernetic fish people, right? it's just the vehicle for telling stories about community and relationships.
Now, that's really cool. My next question would be that some new GMs might tend to prefer that sort of more hand-holding, here's the big bad guy.
Yeah.
And I know you've said previously that you guys are creating this and it's going to continue to have that kind of support more episodes. What did you call them?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Let's why don't you take the time to kind of talk about those for a little bit?
Yeah, so we are, even within the FUG team, the Fragging Unicorns team, we have some of us who prefer to have pre-made missions or pre-made adventures, so that we can sort of share those experiences with other people. So, like, I don't know if you've had this experience where you've been at a convention or you've been at a local game store and you meet other people that have played the same things that you have, right? So if you're in Shadowrun, maybe you played Maria Mercurial's mission back in the day, or if you're D&D, maybe you say, oh, remember blah blah blah, Curse of Strahd, and then somebody goes, oh, I played that too, and you sort of have this shared experience, even though you weren't sharing that experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a sort of artificial community built around people that have shared experiences, even if they weren't at the same table when it happened. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of one of the reasons why we're coming to this, is saying, instead of just releasing a core rulebook, which is what's being funded through the Kickstarter, we're also committed to releasing ongoing episodes, which are what we call adventures, so that your GMs have something to work with, right? So they see sort of this is how the GM, or this is how the developers see that this is supposed to work, but also give you some ideas, and so that you don't have to work as hard. And we're putting it in a format that is so easy to follow that a GM can just pick it up and run with it without having to, memorize every single step along the way. We think that, like, number one, that's just going to help new GMs, right? Especially when you're making a new game, to give some guidance as to how this is supposed to work. But also, there's just, again, GMs that may not have the time, they may not have the inclination, they may not be the best improv people. So we are committed to making as many episodes as people will play. And we are also aware that they're not going to be the biggest moneymakers episodes, right? So only the GM usually buys the mm-hmm. adventure pack. But we just are, I think we've come to the point where we just say this is a marketing decision, right? So instead of spending something on ads, we're just going to make an episode and give that away for as cheap as we can, so that people can, so the GMs feel empowered, and so that the community can grow with those shared experiences together.
And I believe one of those has already been unlocked as one of the stretch goals on the Kickstarter, no? So that's going to be coming, will that be printed in the core rulebook?
No, so
or
we
just
have
as PDF.
So there's going to be an episode that will be included with the core rulebook, right? And that will be either like sort of slipped in the core rulebook, or shipped with the core rulebook, or maybe it'll just be in the core rulebook itself. We haven't really decided which one of those it's going to be. But that's going to be sort of the introductory adventure. It's going to sort of hit a bunch of different mechanics, going to teach you how to play, right? It start real small, like how do you make 1 or 2 rolls, and then it'll add the sort of magic in it, it'll add the tech in it. So it'll sort of just teach you how to play along the way. But for the Kickstarter, the $30,000 stretch goal that we had just got unlocked earlier today. Was it earlier today? Earlier yesterday?
Yesterday, I believe.
Sometime. time
it's been moving quite quickly.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the adventure PDF got unlocked, and that's going to be one that we're going to give away to everybody who backed for free, right? The PDF. We are thinking that we are going to eventually end up printing it as well, maybe bundle it with a couple of other things. But everybody who backed the Kickstarter is going to get that for free. And one of our devs is writing that, James Palmer, and that's called Nobody's Vault But Mine. And it takes place in Neo-Babylon, and then you leave Neo-Babylon. You're sort of on the outskirts in the wilderness around Neo-Babylon, and you're sort of searching for a lost technology that can either really, really help or really, really hurt, depending on who ends up with it. So yeah, that's one we're pretty excited about as well. So I guess by the end, even if we don't unlock any stretch goals, by the end of the campaign or by the end of when Subversion gets made, you will have at very least 2 adventures for free that you can run for your table.
Well, I think we're going to definitely get more than just that, because we're, I believe, at 35,000 right now, and the next unlock's at 40. So
I hadn't checked in a while, so that's cool. I'm glad we.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. So let's segue into the more details about the Kickstarter then. Let's talk about the reward tiers. What are those?
All right. This is where I stall because I should have had that. I should have thought this through. So yeah, we have a number of different tiers. The first tier is the PDF, which you can get for $25. Then we have the physical book, which is available at $60, which if you back in the next 5 hours, you can get the free poster map along with that as the early bird reward. For
Make sure you do select the correct tier.
Yes, there are 2 tiers.
Poster map.
One of them says select this for poster map, and the other does not. So make sure you select the right one. At the $125 tier, we have the PDF and the hardcover, but also all Subversion books and assets that are going to be on Roll20. You'll get those for free, and there's going to be a lot of them. Like, we're going to have a bunch of tokens, and all of our books and adventure PDFs are going to be uploaded to there. So if you're into Roll20 and you want to do Subversion, that's probably the cheapest way to get everything. At the $250 level, you'll get the PDF and the hardcover and the assets on Roll20. And you'll also get a seat at the table with one of our devs to play Subversion. The cool thing about this, and I know that Ava's passionate about this, is once we're done with that game, once we are done with the sort of Kickstarter backer game, Ava is going to take everything that happened in that episode and write it as a novella, which will be released later. So if you get the $250 level, you get to play a game with the devs and then also have your characters and their story canonized.
As canon fiction.
Yeah, canon fiction in the Subversion universe. At the $500 level, you get to create your own character that will be included in the core rulebook, which is probably going to end up being like a pre-generated character that people can just play right off the bat, or maybe as the leader of a faction, or maybe as somebody who is referenced as an important NPC. We can negotiate all of those things, but at the $500 level, you are guaranteed a spot at the table as far as characters go in the core rulebook. At $1,000, it's basically like the $250 level times 5. So you and 4 of your friends get to play in a game with the devs, and then again, that story and those characters will be canonized in a novella written by Ava. And then at the $1,500 level, you'll get the PDF and the hardcover, and then you'll work with the devs to create an entire faction that will be inserted into the core rulebook. And factions, I don't think we've talked about this, but when you're creating your communities, you will have 5 different factions that will also be interacting with your community, and the faction game is something that the GM plays with, and that sort of increases the danger from those factions, or you can increase their likelihood to help you. But the faction game is actually something that affects your community quite greatly. So we'll have a list of, 50 or so factions that are in the core rulebook, along with their sort of vital stats. And if you pledge at the $1,500 level, you can create your very own faction for people to choose ever after.
That is so cool. If only I had the $500 to drop. I probably would if I stopped backing so many other Kickstarters.
That's okay. Since you're writing some of the novellas, you can just put your character in anywhere you want. You can make a faction.
Just have a cameo of my own character. Oh, all right. So what are the stretch goals that we're looking at? We've already unlocked a couple of them.
Yeah, so at 20,000, which we passed, I think the first day or so. Yeah, we got extra art, right? So there's a number of artwork pieces that we wanted to make, but making a book is expensive, and so we were like, maybe we just hold off and make sure that we hit that goal before we get more art. So now all of our different cultures are going to have their own art, and I'm excited to reach out to our cover artist to maybe do a couple more pieces for us because they're pretty amazing. That's Marco Gonzalez did our cover art and a couple of the pieces of art, like a Pantheon piece that's on the inside. It's a really, really cool piece. At the $30,000 level, which is already unlocked as well, was the Adventure PDF, which everybody's going to get for free. At the $40,000 level, a second Adventure PDF is going to be released. And I think, I'll check with the devs, I think that one's also going to be released for free. But if not, it's going to be like a very, very cheap add-on. Then at $50,000, we have a fiction anthology add-on. That's going to be basically a bunch of stories that are told in the setting of Neo-Babylon. We have a one that we did for Gangs of the Undercity called Neo-Babylon Nights, and you can get that on Amazon right now, and it's kind of fun to read. I also
had that one on my bookshelf. I think I might have been one of the first to order it.
Yeah, so again, we'll do the fiction anthology, another fiction anthology at the $50,000 level, and then at the $60,000 level, we will make our map of Neo-Babylon. That's a different map than the one that the early bird backers get. The early bird backers get a 24 by 36 map of the continent called Azor, which is where Neo-Babylon is. It's like right in the middle, so you can kind of get like a really nice looking. It looks sort of like a real map, like in a map set that you might find at home, and that's pretty cool. So this map though will be just Neo-Babylon, and it will have all the districts of Neo-Babylon and all the important spots of the city of Neo-Babylon itself. And that will be available to everybody at in PDF if we hit the 60,000, and we'll have a physical version as an add-on as well. At 75,000, we'll have a third adventure PDF, which means that we will launch the game with 4 adventures ready to go. And then at 1,000, we will have a GM screen. We do have 1,000. What did I say?
You said 1,000. You missed a couple zeros there.
at 1,000 times 100. Yeah, at 100,000, we'll have a GM screen that'll be available as an add-on as well. And I would say that if we get to 105,000, then we will have a German translation of Subversion that will be released in Germany and going through a distributor there. So that's kind of exciting too.
That's awesome.
But it's a hidden goal that I didn't want to throw out there. Until we were sort of getting up into that range. So if you're German and you want Subversion, maybe lay down a couple 10 grands to make it happen.
Right. There was a question in the chat, less about more about how Kickstarters go entirely. Hi, MJ Drake. I see you're new to the channel. So with most Kickstarters, that would be correct. You can't really play it until the Kickstarter's done, and then you have to wait months. However, with Subversion, we have a version of the rules already available. Version like 0.49, something like that. And if you back it, it's actually a link to download it is in the first backer update. Or you can join the Fragging Unicorns Discord channel, and I believe you can get it there as well.
Yeah, if I understand the question, you might otherwise want to see the game before you back it on Kickstarter. Usually that doesn't happen, but we've made the game fully available at its current state, right? This is not going to be the end result at all. But
it's enough to play.
Yeah, you can definitely download the whole game right now. You can play, see if you like it or not. And if you don't like it, don't back. But if you end up liking it or even loving it, then you can back us. And then also you can come to our Discord, tell us everything that you don't like, and you work with the devs on maybe changing some of that stuff and helping us make the game even better. But a small correction, we released the full rules in the first update on the Kickstarter, but the link got broken because we changed something. So in the second update, you can find the rules download that's not going to change.
Oh, thank you, Billy Berserker. I was just going to grab that link to drop in the chat. That's why we have moderators.
Also, if I saw earlier, Billy Berserker says this game company needs a Griffin miniature. Well, I have good news for you. Part of our original Kickstarter for Gangs of the Undercity, we made a huge Griffin miniature that has a bunch of different options for you to make it either a traditional Griffin, or you can make it a cyber Griffin with these huge cybernetic wings and cybernetic head. And we have a set of pet Griffs, which are a bunch of different smaller Griffins that are mixes of different animals. So mixes of cats and parakeets called parakitties, or mixes of beagles and eagles called beagles, mixes of crows and coyotes called coyotes. Right. So we've got a set of those coming out, and they should be out if everything goes well. By the end of next week, we should have those for sale.
How are you gonna mix a beagle and an eagle and just call it a beagle?
It's like the universe did it for us.
Oh, that kills me. And can you have those as let's say animal companions as a PC?
You like theoretically can. You theoretically can. We will have statistics for them if that's what you want to do. But and we will have pets as playable things that you can have. But I don't know if they'll be in the core rulebook or not. I will say if we can make them balanced and make them play how we want to, but before the core rulebook comes out, then we'll try to do that. But we also have plans on releasing like a sort of character-focused book. Yeah, or like things that will sort of increase and expand what you're able to do. And that book should be, well, we'll start working on that as soon as we get the core book out. So stay tuned, I guess.
One step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of one step at a time, what do we have to look forward to for Subversion and Fragging Unicorns as a whole?
For Subversion, one step at a time, you have to look forward to the ending of the Kickstarter. That's all that we'll be focused on for the next month. So please tell your friends and whatnot. But then after that, we're going to basically take a long time of community interaction and community play and do that kind of stuff, and take all of the feedback that we can, make Subversion the best possible game we can, taking feedback right up until the very last minute where we send it to print. So hopefully it'll be the absolute best game that we can possibly make it. That's what we're sort of focused on. We've got our writers lined up for all of the adventures that are coming out, all of the episodes. We're going to be at Origins and Gen Con and ReaperCon this year, running games, playing 3 of those different adventures. And then, we're hoping, if everything goes well, to have the game shipped out by December of this year. That's what our plan is for Subversion. As far as Fragging Unicorns goes, beyond Subversion, one of our other devs is working on a personal project called Hellslayers, and that is a sort of Doom inspired Morkborg hack. So you could be looking forward to Clifton Lambert, aka Mr. Johnson from the Arcology podcast, is writing that, and that will probably launch on Kickstarter. Oh, I don't know, a couple months, I think, maybe 2 or 3 months after Kickstarter.
Yeah,
I think you're
around there. I am working on that, and I actually made the cover for it. And can I just say it's fucking
awesome? You can't say that on Gen Con TV.
Fragging awesome is what I said, actually.
But then after Cliff takes care of that and does Hellslayers, the next project after that probably is either some sort of Subversion related thing, or I have a superhero themed game that I'm working on in the very, very, very background that is using the Misspent Youth rules, but in a superhero setting. So we're pretty excited about that. Further down the line, or maybe not, depending on how things go, we have a Fragging Unicorns card game, which is a game about dating and consent with mythological creatures. So that'll be super fun. And a bunch of other smaller things that we're thinking of. But we usually have more ideas than time and money. So.
Isn't that how it goes?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel that. So I think we're about wrapping up. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about as far as Subversion or the Kickstarter or
Everything
general?
that I want to say boils down to this. I would love for you to back our game called Subversion on Kickstarter right now. But more than that, I would just love for you to be kind to the people around you. So if you can only do one, be kind. But if you can be kind and you have money left over to back Subversion, then I would love you to do that.
All right. So let's talk about where can people find you as either as a person or Fragging Unicorns as a company.
You can check me out on the Twitters at unicorn_opti, or you can find Fragging Unicorns at Fraggin Unicorns on Twitter. You can search for us on Facebook. You can go to fraggingunicorns.com to buy our stuff and our minis and our games. You can go to that Kickstarter website.
That Billy just dropped in the comments.
Right, and search for Subversion, or you can head down to, I think Billy also dropped the link for the Discord somewhere in there, and that's where the Discord is blown up with people reading and offering comments and generally loving on people in the Discord. So yeah, all those places, and I think I'm on Mastodon too. Actually, I know I am. But Mastodon's got a really weird way of dropping your name, so I don't have it memorized.
Fair enough. I haven't touched it myself. New things are scary.
It'll be okay, Ava. It'll be all right.
All right. Well, we went a bit longer this week. However, for our regular viewers, we will not have a live version, a live play of the Emerald Glitch show. A number of players were not able, for one reason or another, to make it tonight. So instead, we will be replaying the one-shot show that we did of Subversion back in December. So if you are new and you want to see how Subversion actually looks like in play, stick around.
And then go back Subversion.
And yes, go back Subversion.
Unless you don't like it, then don't.
And keep being awesome. I hope I've given the tech enough time that we're wrapping up.